Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip over there. So the beer we're going to have a look at today is actually a collaboration beer. It's 1/3 Estonian on the home side and 2/3 Russian on the away side. All three of the breweries involved here have featured on the channel before, and I've had some really nice beers from them. And the particular beer that we're looking at today is actually a special version of one that I've reviewed on the channel for you before. So this should be quite an interesting review actually, and I have to say I am very curious to see how this one turns out, and I hope, as always, you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So for this review then, we are going to go to Tartu in the southeast of Estonia, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Pühaste Pruulikoda. So this is another member of their Silver series. This one is the Trinity in Black bourbon barrel aged version. It comes in at 13.5% ABV, and it's an Imperial Stout, as the name suggests, aged in bourbon barrels. So this one has tonka beans, cocoa nibs, cinnamon and vanilla in it, and it's brewed in collaboration with Brew from St. Petersburg and Zagovor, who are from Moscow over in Russia. So yeah, really cool to have one of these to review for you here on the channel. This beer was actually a gift from Aroma at Pühaste. When I interviewed him for the channel, he gave me a couple of the Silver Series beers along with a few others as well. And so yeah, this is the second of the three that he gave me. He was actually going to give me all of them, but I just didn't have enough space for them, unfortunately. So yeah, I was only able to take 3 and then another 2 beers. But you know, I was impressed with the last one that we did. That was very nice. And I do have one more to have a look at as well, which is a rum barrel aged one actually. So very curious to see how that one turns out. But yeah, in the meantime, really nice to have a look at this one. It's nice to return to Pühaste again after quite a while actually. I've not seen one of their beers through Systembolaget in a little while actually, so fingers crossed we'll get something else from them soon. But yeah, definitely looking forward to this one again. Trinity in Black, the original version was 12.5%, and this one obviously is a little bit higher because it's been in the bourbon barrels. So yeah, curious to see how it turns out, like I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Pühaste, Zagavor and Brew, and you will no doubt see more added to all 3 of those lists at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. You will find one in there for the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you, and another one for the Russian beers. This one will appear in both because it is dual nationality. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the breweries then, on to my brewery notes, and we're going to begin with Pühaste, since these guys are the home brewery. So Puhäste, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Tartu in southeastern Estonia, and they were founded back in 2016 by Eero Mander, Lauri Aidaman and Ular Kaljurand. So Lauri comes from a background in IT, while Ular is a businessman that specialised in restaurants and bars, while Eero was a home brewer for a number of years, starting in 2011 when he was brewing at his summer house in Pusa, and he released his first commercial beers in 2014 under the name Blessed Virgin, which proved to be very successful. He actually studied divinity, I think, originally. He was studying religion at university, he told me in his interview. And so yeah, I think that was where he got the name Blessed Virgin from. But they started out as a gypsy brewery, and they brewed in various other breweries around Estonia, mainly up in Tallinn in the time. But they decided in 2015 that they were going to set up their own brewery. So they opened this brewery in September of 2016, which can be found on Tehe Street in the southeast of Tartu. And they've already had to expand their fermentation capacity quite dramatically because of how high a demand there is for their beers. And they're now brewing in the region of 3,500 hectolitres or 350,000 litres of beers per year. But they also have the Kelder bar in the city, and They also, apparently they sometimes also run a little bit of a tap room at the brewery as well. I've heard, like, I think they were saying that they sometimes open up the brewery and have people to visit and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And they also have a bar up in Tallinn as well, but they are looking to kind of change the location of that from what I understand. The brewery itself originally was like an industrial laundry, but these days I think it's going to be quite a permanent home for Pühaste unless they need to expand again. If you want to see what the brewery's like, you can of course check out my brewery visit video, my interview that I did with Aroma, and it was really nice to meet him. A lovely guy actually, and took a lot of time to show me around, helped me pack up my beers as well because I was useless with the kind of taping machine and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really fun to meet him, and he was a great guy. I'm sure we'll see him at like Brewskival or something up here in Sweden at some stage, so I'll make sure that I enjoy a beer with him if I see him at the festival. That would be really cool. But yeah, as of March 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 165 different kinds of beer, and yeah, they're always releasing new stuff, so I always keep an eye out for what comes out through Systembolaget. But yeah, it was definitely cool to get down to Tartu and see the city again. Lovely little city actually. Estonia is a wonderful country that I would recommend you visit. Lovely people, and they've got some great craft beer these days as well. Lots of really good breweries. I mean, Sori, you know, Pojala, Leha, Ulenaut, Pühaste, you know, there's a lot of really good breweries there these days. Tanker, Kebliku, to name a few others as well. So yeah, lots of very good beer to be had in Estonia these days. There must be about 50 or 60 different breweries in the country actually. So some of them very small, and some of them that I do need to try and get a few more beers from and review for you at some stage as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Pühaste for the moment. It takes its name from the Pusa village where Eero originally started his brewing, and yeah, that's it. So yeah, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, on to the next brewery then. So Zagovor. So Zagavor Brewery was founded back in 2014, and it can be found in Moscow, and apparently a lot of breweries in Russia started up when the currency collapsed in 2014, and this meant that the imported beers became very expensive. So to get around it, they started brewing their own. Quite a novel way to do it, I guess. But the brewery was originally founded by 6 people, although one of them left being active in the brewery to return to medicine, and another went to work in television, but he actually still helps out there as well. So the 4 founders that are still active in the brewery are Grigory Maleev, Alexander Maltsev, and Alexander Sasha Korobkov, and then also Vadim Gurov as well. But the friends apparently met through music and played in different bands. They travelled around and they drank different craft beers together, and on their travels in America and Australia they started to encounter these craft beers, and they decided after a while that they wanted to brew their own stuff, and this took them down the home brewing route. But initially the brewery were contract brewing their beers, but then they opened up their own brewery in early 2018, and all the equipment that they have is Russian built, and it comes from 3 different companies. So some of it comes from Brew Success Group in St. Petersburg, some of it comes from Nomas in Mias, and also some from Pintcraft in Voronezh. But Sasha Korobkov is the head brewer, and they started off brewing 180 hectolitres per month, but they do have the capacity to brew 300 hectolitres per month. But as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 175 different kinds of beer, and they also have an association with the Rule Tap Room and Dogma Bottle Shop in Moscow. That was actually where my friend Hannah got my first Zagovor beers that I reviewed for you here on the channel. But you know, it was quite funny actually. I got those beers, and then literally 2 months or so later, these beers actually started appearing in Sweden, which was crazy. My first encounter with Russian beers was, you know, back in about 2015 or something like that at the Russian Beer Festival down in Malmö. But the word Zagovor that they use as their name translates into English as conspiracy. So Zagovor Brewery is essentially the conspiracy brewery, if you like. But yeah, really well respected brewery these days, quite well known throughout Europe, probably along with AF Brew, who we'll come on to in a minute. Those 2 are probably the best known Russian craft breweries throughout the European Union these days. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Zagovor. Again, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on to our last brewery then. We're sticking to Russia for this one. So AF Brew. So AF Brew, as I've told you already, are based in St. Petersburg, and they were founded back in 2012 by Nikita Filipov, Dmitry Buldakov and Artem Kolchakov. So they had previously worked for Baltika, who are obviously very, very well known, one of the big Russian mass production breweries, but they were interested in experimental beer, and they said that when they started brewing their very small batches that there was a little bit of a witch hunt for them within the company, and they still worked for Baltika at the time, and they received an appointment with the CEO who told them they had to immediately stop brewing their small batches of beer, even though it was only like a few hundred litres that they were doing. But they started off as a gypsy brewery, and so they brewed their beers in a lot of other places before they eventually built their own brewery in November of 2016. But the brewery itself has an on-site tap room, and they also own the Red Rum bar in the city as well. And I will make sure that when I get to St. Petersburg, I'll check those out and film some out and about videos for you actually. And the guys at AF Brew did message me, and they said they were quite keen to do a kind of meet the brewery segment, so that would be pretty awesome actually. The guys at Zagovor were very keen on doing that as well, so I really look forward to actually getting to Russia and do that. I've been wanting to go to Russia for a long time. Fascinating country. But the AF in AF Brew stands for Anti-Factory, and they said that the basic idea behind this was that you can use craft beer as an excuse to escape from the everyday. So yeah, they liked it because they were kind of referring to the social aspect of craft beer, if you like. I think it's derived from some kind of Russian phrase, if you like. But as of March 2021, they've produced around 200 different kinds of beer, and that number is always expanding. You know, AF Brew are doing some really interesting kind of big stouts and stuff like this. They've collaborated with a lot of European breweries over the last year or two, actually, come to think of it. The same with Zagovor. The Russian breweries are really trying to get their name out there into Europe now, which is great to see, because the quality of the Russian beers, in my experience, is pretty damn high. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about AF Brew for the moment. If you want to learn more about them, again, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages. So yeah, a bit of a longer history section for you on this video because we've got 3 breweries involved, but yeah, that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. But yeah, that is us done with that. If you know, we'll have a look at the beer itself now. I'm really curious to see what this has in store for us. So before I actually filmed the video, because I always seem to have problems with wax tops, I did slice underneath the cap of the beer so that I could get it open a little bit more easily. But there you can see, here is the nice label on this one. Quite a bit plainer than you would normally get from Pühaste, but that is the trademark of the Silver Series. There you can see that there. But yeah, it says that this one is aged on Heaven Hill casks, which I believe are from Kentucky, if I remember rightly. So a Heaven Hill barrel-aged version of Trinity in black, brewed in collaboration with AF Brew and Zagovor. And there you can see all 3. Not sure how well that's going to show up because of the reflection of the screen, but there you can see all 3 of the brewery symbols on the side there. And it has in Estonian as well and English about the Pühaste Silver Series. So yeah, lovely looking beer, this one. It says best before, oh, I'm not sure which way around this is. This meant to be the 29th of the 1st, 2025. I'm not sure what way around they do their dates in Estonia, if it's like the Swedish dates, but yeah, okay, we'll go with that then. But yeah, Pühaste Silver Series 2020, 13.5% ABV. This one brewed with tonka beans, cinnamon, vanilla, and cocoa nibs. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. There we go. So yeah, putting the slice into the wax definitely works. Getting some of these wax tops off, it can be a pain in the arse, to be quite honest with you. And I mean, if you're just drinking it normally, then who cares? Once you're in, you're in. But if you're doing beer videos, it is a pain in the arse to get into these things. Because I like to show the pour and the open and all this. But yeah, sometimes just not possible. But yeah, as you can see with this one, that is one of the blackest beers you are going to find. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is going to be a monster. I actually couldn't tell you when I reviewed the Trinity in black. It must have been about 2 years ago or something like that, because we got it through the Tillfällig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and that was a very, very impressive beer actually. So I'm curious to see what the barrel-aged version of this one is going to be like. And that's what I tried to do when when Aero was giving me the choice of these beers, I wanted to take them from a variety of different barrels, because quite often they have the same beer and then they just put it in lots of different barrels. Like I think there was, you know, a rum barrel aged version of this, maybe a Madeira barrel aged version, and I think there was something else as well, if I remember rightly. So he's got a whole host of barrels at the brewery that he's putting things in. But what I tried to do was I tried to take ones that were beers that I'd had the original versions of, and I tried to take them from a variety of different casks actually. So the first one I reviewed for you was the Madeira. It was a Madeira barrel. This one obviously is a bourbon barrel, and then the last one that you're going to see is a rum barrel aged version. But yeah, this should be pretty cool. But yeah, as you can see, and as you'd expect from a big Imperial Stout, this beer has poured pretty much black as night. You're not going to get much blacker than that, to be honest with you. If I shine the light through this, there's absolutely nothing coming through it. You can see that when we poured the beer, there was a tiny little bit of head on top of it, but that's faded away to be pretty much nothing in the middle, and just a slight foamy layer around the edge of the glass. And I would describe that as being a very, very dark tan actually. So it's got a lovely it's got a lovely just kind of colour to it, this one. As I say, I love big dark Imperial Stouts like this. Remember, when it comes to the colour of your beers, it's dependent on a couple of things. So one would be the type of malts that you use in the first place. Two would be the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the beer, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour. But again, it's dependent on the malts that you choose in the first place. If you've got black malt in there, it's going to be darker. If you have adjuncts in the beer, that's going to affect it as well, such as it does with you know, these big Berliner Weisses and things. And then if you barrel age it, that is obviously going to affect the colour of the beer as well. So yeah, quite a few factors decide the colour of your beer. But a big Imperial Stout like this is probably double mash, and it's probably also quite a long boil, you know, 4 or 5 hours in the boil, or something like that. So yeah, kind of crazy. But yeah, in terms of Imperial Stouts, this one just looks exactly as you'd expect, but definitely one of the blackest stouts that I've come across. 1 or 2 big bubbles on the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the surface there, but yeah, not too much carbonation visible in this one. I'm guessing there's not a lot of wheat in this beer when it's not really maintaining its head. But yeah, certainly looks the part. Let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one and just see how we get on. I'm very curious about this for sure. That does smell very, very nice. It smells like it's really interesting, this, because it has a bit of pungency to it as well. You can smell a bit of everything coming out of this. You do get the sweetness of the vanilla, you get a lot of the brown sugar, you can smell the kind of the sort of cinnamon as well, and the tonka beans come out a little bit later. Tonka beans are a fascinating adjunct to put in beers. They're like they've just got such a rich flavour, and I'm just and yeah, it is just great. I mean, again, this is another beast of a beer from Pühaste. Yeah, so many awesome Imperial Stouts from these guys. I think, you know, if people ask me about Puhäste, you know, those are the beers you're going to think of from these guys. They're one of they're probably one of the best Imperial Stout producers in Europe these days. I was trying to set up Aero to do a collaboration with Hannes from Nerd Brewing here in Malmö, so that would be awesome if they do manage to set that up. That would be really cool. But yeah, the aroma out of this beer is just ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, this one is just a beautiful beer actually. So big thumbs up to Pühaste and to AF and Zagovor once again. But you know, if you know all 3 of these breweries, they are very, very capable in this Imperial Stout style. So let's try and break down this aroma a little bit more and see how we go. Yeah, so straight away with this beer, the backbone of it is that bourbon barrel aging. You can smell the nice kind of smooth oakiness in there, and you can smell the sort of sugar. I always find that American bourbon whiskey smells quite a bit sweeter than Scotch whiskey. So it almost comes across, it's kind of like sugar caney, but it's not quite as bright as, it's definitely not quite as bright as, you know, like rum, for example. But for me, the bourbon always reminds me just a little bit of like a kind of sugar cane or kind of something like that. So yeah, you can smell the bourbon elements in this beer straight away. Kind of on top of that, I think that's where the tonka bean is sitting. I think the tonka bean and its kind of fibrous smell, if you like, is just sitting on top of that. So you can really smell that sort of beany, fibrous kind of quality coming out of this beer. But yeah, on top of that as well, kind of around the edge of the tonka bean notes, that's when you start to get the cinnamon for me. The cinnamon really kind of just sits around the edge of that as well. And then of course you're getting a good little bit of the kind of chocolate sitting there. The chocolate and the cocoa, the chocolate kind of cocoa nibs kind of quality, as I was saying, they sort of mix in. It smells like they mix in with the tonka bean a little bit, and they make the tonka bean just kind of smell a little bit drier. It sort of accentuates the or promotes the sort of fibrousy side of the tonka bean as well. So you can really get that. This beer, it does smell a little bit dry in the middle, but then it's also a very, very rich aroma at the same time. But there's a lovely big kind of oily vanilla quality out of this one, which I really, really like. And you know, you've just got a lovely blend of things going on in here. I mean, this beer gets a massive, massive thumbs up from me. I think this is just an awesome take on the beer. It's great. Absolutely love it. So yeah, in terms of the malty adjuncty side of things, this is great. I mean, you do get a good bit of chocolate out of this one. Like I say, the chocolate comes across as a little bit powdery in a sense. It's quite a dark chocolate though, you know, a sort of 60-70% cocoa chocolate that's in there. The vanilla comes out a little bit later. This beer is of course all about the adjuncts. There's an element of brown sugar in there. You know, you can pick up a little bit of a kind of toasty caramel note, a bit of a kind of more highly caramelized treacle molasses kind of thing too. So yeah, the aroma that comes out of this beer, I feel, is really quite nice actually. So yeah, this is definitely a very, very interesting beer. It gets a big thumbs up from me on the aroma side of things. Hoppy wise, you're not getting too much out of it. You can pick up the remnants of some of the hops, a little bit of earthiness in there, and you can pick up just a little touch of floral and grassiness. But you know, I've had this beer, I'm guessing it's been bottled maybe about a year ago, something like that, because it says on the back of the 29th of the 1st 25, so it's probably been in the bottle a little bit over a year. A lot of the hops will have dropped out of that, even more if you leave it for longer of course. So yeah, you do get a bit of earthiness. There's a wee remnant of floral character and some hoppy sort of things coming out of it as well. But on the fruity side of things, it smells, it does smell really, really lovely. I mean, big juicy plummy notes for me. It's got a wee bit of an almost kind of cakey vibe to it as well. It has got a little bit of that kind of pruny datey sort of fruit cakey type thing. I do get a wee bit of that on the front of the notes as well. Definitely some black currants, a little bit of a kind of juicier blackberry, but yeah, nice cakey dark dried red fruits in this one. Dates, prunes, bit of a big oily plum as well, then black currants and blackberries. Beautiful aroma, but that's kind of what we expect from the Silver series. Let's have a taste of this one though and see how we get on. I'm just really, really curious about this beer. This is going to be awesome. So yeah, the Trinity in black, Silver series 2020 version, an Imperial Stout, 13.5% ABV with cinnamon, tonka beans, vanilla, cocoa nibs from Pühaste in Tartu in Estonia in collaboration with AF Brew from St. Petersburg and Zagovor from Moscow. Let's get stuck in. Slanje, skål, tervisex, na zdrowie. That's just ridiculous. That's just a stupid, crazy beer. Yeah, that's a monster. It gets a thumbs up straight away. That is a beast of a beer. It's a beautiful Imperial Stout, that. Yeah, if you get the chance to try this one, you are definitely going to enjoy that. Hands up, you know, straight away. This is just an absolute beast. The original one was really good, and I've said in some videos, you know, I always question the need for barrel aging, but I think in this case it really works very, very well. It just kind of smoothens the beer out a little bit. Quite often with barrel aging, you'll lose a little bit of your mouthfeel and things like that, but quite a few breweries now brew the beer a bit thicker to just compensate for that, because usually, yeah, you'd lose a bit of the mouthfeel, but you'd get all these infused flavours. But this beer kind of retains the thickness of the original from what I remember. It maybe even feels a bit thicker, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, this is a monster, so thumbs up once again to Pühaste and AF and Zagovor. But yeah, beautiful in its aroma, beautiful in its flavour. You can't ask for much more than that. So straight away, across the middle of your palate, you get that lovely smooth oaky quality in there. The American oak barrels always just come across as really, really smooth. That forms the backbone of your beer. You can feel that in the middle third of your palate and in the kind of back third of your palate too. So that's really, really interesting. So lovely smooth woody notes in that middle third of your palate. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back a little bit, you get a few you do get a few kind of drier woody notes in there as well. So I really like how that side of things goes together. So yeah. Yeah, it's as I say, it's just a crazy beer, this one. That on top of the wood, of course, you get that sort of bourbony, kind of sugarcaney kind of thing coming out of the beer, and it feels a bit boozy, but that's kind of part of what really makes the beer. The layers that I was describing in the aroma actually translate quite well into what you get out of the flavour of this one, which again is just, you know, really nice. So how do we say, for me, the that woody character is just kind of spot on. Yeah, nice smooth American oak underneath. You can feel a little bit of the vanilla in there as well. Then on top of that, it's just like you've got a layer of that kind of sweetness that you get from American bourbon. But yeah, sitting on top of that layer, that's when you get that sort of fibrous-y thing from the tonka beans. You can feel the tonka beans just kind of sitting on top of that actually. And then, you know, the tonka beans are kind of in like a circle, and you get that cinnamon flavour just around the edge of it. You really can feel that. The cinnamon comes out a little bit closer towards the edge of the tongue, which I think is great. But on top of the sort of fibrous-y smoothness that you get the tonka beans, it's the cocoa nibs. The cocoa nibs aren't as prominent in the flavour in this one as I would have thought. They come out a little bit more towards the front half of that middle third of your palate, so you definitely get a little bit more of the kind of drier notes from the cocoa nibs further forward on the palate, which is quite interesting. The vanilla, I think, starts to push its way out a little bit more in the aftertaste as well. You almost just get a little touch of an oily character builds on that front half of the middle third of your palate, and that's where the vanilla comes out for me. So yeah. Yeah, so the vanilla side to this beer again, I think, is it's really interesting. This is a beer, it's got a beautiful aftertaste to it, but this beer is just kind of ridiculous. Could this be the best one I've had from Pühaste yet? I don't know. It's very hard to say because I've had so many good Imperial Stouts from these guys. You know, it's really hard to compare. It's like when I review the Nerd Brewing beers, people always ask me, well, what's the best Nerd Brewing beer? And I'm like, you know, they're all, you always get a really high quality product from these kind of breweries. You know, all three of the breweries involved in this are going to give you some, you know, some interesting ones. I've had great IPAs, both from, I've had some really nice New England IPAs from Zagavor. I've had some really nice, more kind of West Coasty ones from AF. And then when it comes to Pühaste, it's all about these big stouts and things. So it's difficult to say which one is best. But this one is definitely one of the top ones I've had from them. It's just, you know, beautifully executed. It's really nicely done. But yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, it really smoothens out and the whole beer just kind of mellows out a little bit, which I really enjoy about it. So yeah, this is definitely an interesting one for sure. So big thumbs up to all three of the breweries involved here. Absolutely. So yeah, this one is really good. I mean, it's all about the adjuncts for me. As you go further into the aftertaste, you'll notice that kind of in the middle of that sort of tonka bean flavour that the beer has, it's got a lovely kind of brown sugary note to it. I mean, you do start to get a kind of molassesy, kind of toasty, caramelly sort of thing. You can feel that sort of flavour build up out of the beer, but all that kind of it kind of emerges from within that big pile of adjuncts that you've got in the middle of your tongue. And I think the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, the more you get that kind of powdery dryness from the cocoa nibs in the beer as well, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the malty side of this beer is pretty special, I have to say. I think it's really nicely done in that sense. So yeah, malty side of this one and adjuncty side is what you'd expect, but it just the flavours are just really well executed, absolutely. So yeah, on that border region then between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there's a bit of an almost kind of, it comes across as quite cakey. I would hesitate to say bread in this one because it just feels a little bit more kind of almost like spongy, so you get a wee bit of a kind of sponge cakey sort of thing in that border region. There's a wee bit of a toasty kind of grainy note comes out of it a little bit. It's almost like a little touch of black malt or something, but yeah, quite a bit of a cakey kind of spongy type thing either side of that middle third of your palate. But if you go into the back third of your palate, you can feel the sort of powdery cocoa quality just kind of sits there as well, and you can feel that that sort of soft cakey vibe just kind of builds up, and the thickness of the beer in the back third of your palate is quite nice as well. I don't get so much in the way of the woody notes kind of coming out of the beer in there as well, but yeah, I do quite like how that goes together. But yeah, the kind of the sort of soft base that this beer has, it really does develop more of a cakiness the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, back third of your palate, chocolatey powdery underlyings, kind of soft cakey kind of note on top of that, and yeah, that works very, very nicely, I have to say. So yeah, the that kind of side of this beer I think goes together very, very nicely actually. So yeah. It's just, as I say, really nicely executed this. I'm surprised at the cakiness. I don't really remember the cakiness out of the original Trinity and Black, in fairness, but yeah, whatever's going on in this one I think is very, very nice in that sense. It really gives you a really dry, kind of powdery, chocolatey sort of thing the further you go into the aftertaste, and some of the tonka bean notes push their way out as well. But yeah, onto the hoppy side of the beer then. Back corners of the palate, you do have a good little bit of earthiness there. That kind of lingers there, and as you go further forward, it develops a little bit more of a herbal quality, and then it just has a wee touch of a kind of floral aromatic note on the front corners of the palate, but round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more sort of grassy as well, so you've got a really nice little vibe coming out of that one too. So yeah, I really like how this side of the beer goes together. So yeah. Yeah. Green component in the beer, as I say, is not overly surprising. That will drop out the longer you age this one, of course. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of things then. So as I said, you've got that sort of cakey vibe in that border region between front third and middle third, and then underneath you do get a bit of that softer cakey sort of thing, a bit of that chocolatey powder kind of note. But when you take the beer in, you get a nice oily kind of plummy character out of it. I'd say there's maybe a tiny little bit of raisin, but then you start to get the sort of cakey powdery sort of thing underneath just dries it out, so you get a little bit of that, and you get a nice kind of, you do get a bit of a kind of figgy note as you go forward on it, but as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, there's a little bit of a soft kind of black curranty kind of thing in there. There's a nice bit of a more oily, there's a bit more of an oily black berry sort of thing comes out of this beer as well. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer from that perspective, I would say. I really like how the fruity side of this beer complements. It's got a little bit of sharpness, it develops a little bit of smoothness later, and then you get more of an oily character out of it on the back end. So yeah. So yeah, the fruity side of this one I think is really, really nicely executed once again. So yeah, I love it. I love how this goes together. So yeah, big thumbs up once again to all three of the breweries involved in here. The fruity thing just kind of complements everything else really nicely. It's got a nice bit of alcohol warmth down here as well, which is good. At 13.5%, you know, you kind of expect that, to be honest. These are special beers, absolutely. The Silver Series. I can see why a lot of people kind of rave about these ones. So I was quite lucky that Aero gave me a couple of these, so big thank you to him once again for making this review possible. But anyway, on to the mouthfeel to round off the review. Definitely a full-bodied beer, no doubt in my mind about that. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's a very kind of, it's quite an oily mouthfeel, this one, but at the same time it maintains a degree of slickness and almost a slight creaminess to it as well, actually. It definitely has a wee touch of creaminess in there, mixing in with the oiliness. But in terms of bitterness, what would we say about this one? I don't know, it develops a bit of a bitterness and dryness in the aftertaste. You know, maybe it's about 50 or 60 IBUs, but at the same time, you know, just because of how slick and smooth the beer is, that covers up a lot of it. So I'd say we have 50 or 60 IBUs, I think is probably fair for this one. Remember though, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing. But yeah, the malt base, like I say, it's got a nice kind of smoothness. It develops a bit of dryness in there. The adjuncts are all really nice and smooth and slightly oily. Then you also get a good wee bit of a kind of fruity, juicy vibe coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, I really like how everything in this one goes together. So it gets a big thumbs up from me on everything. I think it's the mouthfeel of this, the big oily fruits, the little bit of sharpness you get in the beginning, everything, just a solid beer. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This is ridiculous and you need to try it for yourself. I think that sums it up quite nicely. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Pühaste Pruulikoda, Zagovor, and from AF Brew. We will no doubt return to all three of these breweries at some point fairly soon, but this one was the Trinity in Black Silver Series 2020 edition, bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout, 13.5% ABV, tonka beans, cocoa nibs, vanilla and cinnamon in it. And it was just an absolute cracker of a beer. So make sure you check out some of these Silver Series beers, and this one, if you can get a hold of it, I think is a very, very good example. But yeah, thanks again for watching. Check out my social media, check out all three of these breweries, and I will catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers.